Coming up, Australia's young and rich. What are their top qualities? Plus, the markets look to the US election. That is all next. It is your daily 10-minute business and finance news wrap for this Thursday, the 24th of October 2024. The Australian share market fell today, but only by 0.1% on the S&P ASX 200. We'll have the details with Henry Jennings from Markets Today in a few moments. But first, to the Financial Review Young Rich list, which was dominated by tech entrepreneurs. So, what are their top qualities? For that and more, I spoke with Financial Review Rich List editor Yolanda Redrup.
They're a special bunch and they have some characteristics in common. I think one of the terms that often gets thrown around in venture capital circles is called relentless optimism, and that definitely comes through. They have to have this sense of belief, not just in themselves, but in the problem that they're trying to solve and in their ability to make it work. Because if you don't have that, the hurdles in front of you can seem too big to even start. So they all have this sense of relentless optimism. They've also got a willingness to take risk that exceeds a lot of what most people would actually sort of be able to take on. And they have a passion, a willingness to sacrifice, and they also have to have an ability to handle stress. Like these are not overnight success stories. Most of these have taken 5-10 years worth of work to get to this point where they can be on the young rich list. And a lot of that wealth is also actually tied up in equity. So it all comes down to the success of these businesses that they're creating, and with that comes a lot of hurdles along the way.
Run us through the most noteworthy people on the list.
Sure thing. Okay, so leading the list this year, and they have for the past 5 years, in fact, is Melanie Perkins and Cliff Obrecht from Canva. They have created an absolute juggernaut in their design business, and it's actually sort of tipped to most likely pursue a NASDAQ listing in the next 18 or so months. 2026 is what the market expects. It's a $39 billion plus company, and it's created an enormous fortune for the founders, but they actually plan to give a lot of that away and have committed to the giving pledge, where they want to give most of their wealth that comes from this to charitable causes. Other people on the list include Sam Prince from Sombrero, the Mexican chain. He has recently opened his 300th store. He's based out of New York now, but continues to grow that business significantly, and they were also boosted this year, the valuation, by the successful float of one of their smaller rivals, Guzman y Gomez, and that certainly propelled Sam up the list even further this year. And then we've also got a new entrant that's really interesting, and the founders of a company called Advanced Navigation. They do autonomous robotics, and they create the navigation systems for robots that can go into really interesting, hard to reach places. We're thinking deep sea exploration, and then next year it's likely to also land them on the moon.
Okay, of those people in the top 10, right, what are the common themes?
Yeah, look, there's one overarching theme, and that's definitely the strength of the technology sector in creating these fortunes of young Australians. Of the top 10, 7 of those fortunes come from the tech sector. That extends to 8 if you include Ed Craven, the founder of Crypto Casino, stake in that mix. It's by far the sort of most dominant sector, and if you extend that to the top 100, that theme continues to be reflected. The sector makes up more than 2/3 of the fortune of the entire list this year. Then looking at the individuals as well, in addition to Mel and Cliff from Canva, you've also got 3 founders from the one company, being Air Wallets. It's a fintech that was started out of Melbourne, and that's landed three in the top 10 this year, and continues to be a real success story for the Melbourne startup ecosystem.
How has the rich list changed over the past 21 years?
Look, it's a great question, and if you look back to the first edition, 2003, one of the things that comes through most strongly is just how much the tech sector sort of has grown in terms of its importance. Back in 2003, retail was the most dominant sector. Technology came in second, and then there was also a lot in the mix that was sports people and entertainers. that's obviously flipped on its head now, and tech has grown in importance. Other things that have changed is just the degree of wealth. So going back to 2003, the total net worth of the members was only 2.5 billion, and that's grown by around 1,600% this year, which is pretty insane over a 21-year period.
What about the rise of social media? Has that been reflected in the list?
Oh, without a doubt. I mean, if you look at the list, that they sort of go beyond the technology sector, looking at social media, you've got people across the board. You've got people in fitness, you've got people in retail, you've even got people in property, and then you've got the likes of sort of Adrian Portelli, who does these sort of trade promotions that have managed to tap into social media to really grow their presence, and it's become a really critical part of their business models. So when you look at people like Stephanie Miller, who's behind Kick, and Temi Hembrow, they've got these fitness apps, but a large part of that growth does stem from their ability to connect with followers online.
And finally, what about any successful migrant stories in there?
Yeah, definitely. There's quite a few. One that really stands out to me is two of the debutantes on this year's list. They're brothers Angus and Dimitri Tran. They come from Vietnam, immigrated to Australia when they were in their late teens, early 20s for schooling, and they have gone on to create this business that is applying AI to healthcare. Started off with developing an algorithm to identify what embryos were most likely to be successful in IVF, and that's since extended into fields like radiology, where they apply that technology to CT scans and X-rays, and can lead to better and faster diagnoses.
Yolanda Redrup there, the Financial Review Young Rich List editor. And to be young and on that list, the cut-off age is 40 years of age.
Now, Market Day on the SBS On the Money podcast.
Takes us to the Australian share market, which fell today, but only just by 0.1%. For more, I spoke with Henry Jennings from Markets Today. Henry, the ASX opened weaker but turned positive by lunchtime. Why and what drove it?
I think it was a combination really of no follow through in that selling. We also saw Tesla results come out after hours in the US, which I guess helped the technology sentiment really there. We have NASDAQ futures up slightly. It has gone pretty quiet, I have to say. That the US election seems to be looming quite quickly now, and I think a lot of players are moving to the sidelines. So it is relatively quiet, and no one's really in the mood, I think, at the moment to take big bets on anything either way. But Asian markets relatively steady as well. Iron ore relatively steady, and a little bit of defensive buying in the banks today, which always helps. They're such a big part of our market.
You mentioned the US election, so there are lots of global influences hitting the market at the moment. The US election, China, the Middle East. Which do you think will drive the market more so in the short term, and why?
I think at the moment it's really the US election that's really going to be the driver, and hopefully we get an outcome either way. What we don't want to see is courtroom battles and contested election results, which would not be good for the market. Wall Street seems to have backed a Trump victory and seems to be relatively happy with that to some extent, but the bond market is having some issues because of the potential blowout in inflation and those tariffs causing that, and also that neither party really has made any kind of plan to address the US deficit, which is just getting bigger and bigger. And they're now spending more than $1 trillion US a year on interest payments, which is more than they spent on defense in 2023. So it does have a bearing. The bond market has been the key, and that has kind of made us a little bit more cautious, I guess, as those economic numbers coming in from the US have been better than expected. The Fed may not be as aggressive as they had been in the past.
We saw some numerous quarterly updates from various companies today. Any catch your attention?
Well, I guess there were two resource companies today that really caught my attention. One was Newmont in the gold space, which was somewhat underwhelming, to say the least. At one point, they were down around 8%. That was what they were doing in the US. They followed through with an 8% fall here as well. And they have rallied slightly back. But certainly you want your gold miner to be making as much production and controlling those costs as much as they possibly can with these record high gold prices. And that did seem to be a bit of an underwhelming issue for Newmont. The other one, of course, is Fortescue in the big iron ore space. Doesn't help that the iron ore price is a little bit back on the nose again, but also the C1 cash costs were above $20 US. And although they did guide to below or around about that cost is still an issue. Those blowouts there are still an issue for Fortescue. So the market didn't really like that. And
where do you see the opportunities for investors at the moment?
I think it's probably, for the time being, it probably would pay to be somewhat cautious. Many of the big players are moving to the sidelines in advance of the election, but there certainly are some opportunities. We've seen some good bounces in some stocks, especially in the resource space, although they are coming off now. Clearly, there's more stimulus to come from China. That will be the key to it. And a lot of institutions still are probably underweight resources. So it's probably not a bad place to be hunting, but maybe patience is required.
It's Henry Jennings there from Marcus Today. This SBS On the Money stream is provided for informational purposes only. The content in this stream should not be understood as constituting advice or a recommendation. It is not personal advice and it does not consider your personal circumstances or objectives. You should contact a licensed professional before making any financial decision.